Can the real nigga please stand up? There has to be one real nigga left in America, in this damn country. Are there any real niggas left that aren't doing advertisements for gold and f***ing pills? Are there any real niggas left? And I've always been on the latter side of this among conservatives. Conservatives like to say it's all culture. Black America is the way it is because of hip-hop music and the Great Society and that kind of stuff. And I think the uncomfortable reality is a big part of it is intrinsic.
Jews don't like Christians. They hate, especially in Israel. They spit on Christians. They vandalize churches. Yeah. It's very common.
No one's arguing it's anti-Semitic to disagree with Netanyahu. What we are saying is that anti-Semitism is a made-up word. That word has been used to suppress the truth. What truth? The truth, which is that Jewish oligarchs have a disproportionate amount of influence in America. And they are networked transnationally, and they use their Jewish ethnicity as the rallying point, as the organizing principle. They are tribalist. That is our assertion. Do you see the difference?
We want Nick! We want Nick! We want Nick! We want Nick!
Yeah, let's talk Nick Fuentes.
Oh yeah, Diddy got a podcast.
Just real quick before we get into today's video, I want to state that I am almost at 98,000 subscribers, and I want to say thank you so much. And I want to just let all of my avid and loyal supporters know that for the very first time ever on this channel, I will be going live once I hit 100,000 subscribers. I've never done it before. It's just not something I ever got into, but I will do a Q&A once I hit 100,000 subscribers. I anticipate that that'll happen here in the next week or so, so please be on the lookout for that. Now let's get into today's video. If you are not yet a member of the Patreon, link is in the description. Please consider becoming a member, as you will have access to many videos you cannot find here on YouTube. Nick Fuentes, easily the most controversial and polarizing figure, not only on the conservative side or on the right as it pertains to politics, but I would argue that he is easily the most controversial figure in all of the internet right now. And if you don't know who Nick Fuentes is, if you have not seen his thumbnail somewhere along your timeline in your algorithm, I would question your algorithm. I would question how much you've been on social media, because he's been everywhere, which we'll get to later in the video, because I always find it suspicious when the algorithm supports a person, but again, we'll get there. We need to talk about Nick Fuentes on this channel for a plethora of different reasons. One of them being he talks about and exposes a lot of the things that we have been discussing for years on this channel. The people who really run this country, he gives his opinion on who he think that is. The fact that he don't, like Donald Trump is not who we think he is, something I've been saying for more than 3 or 4 years on this channel. Our Vice President, J.D. Vance, he's not who we think he is. A lot of the social media creators, some of the biggest social media creators, especially in politics, they're not organic. And they have been backed by funders that all have agendas. But we'll get to that, because Nick Fuentes has paid the ultimate price, or so they say he's paid the ultimate price. This guy has been banned from airlines. He's been banned from YouTube. He's been banned from a plethora of different banks.
6 years ago to the day, I did a debate on Twitch. They banned me on Twitch because I did so well, and they changed the terms of service to do it. Banned on YouTube, banned on Twitch, banned on PayPal, banned on Stripe, banned from Bank of America, banned from Chase Bank, banned from US Bank, banned from Airbnb, banned from Delta Airlines, banned from CPAC, banned from Email Octopus, Authorized.net, banned from DLive, banned from Instagram, Facebook. I've been banned from shit you haven't even heard of.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start this video off talking about all the things that I agree with him on. I find myself to agree with Nick Fuentes on pretty much most of the things that he talks about. Of course, I'm going to have disagreements here and there, and I have quite a few disagreements, but that guy is a truth teller. And I want to say this first and foremost, he is one of the most talented and gifted speakers in politics under the age of 30 that I've ever heard in my life. And when I say top, I'm saying top 2 or 3. I mean, it's really, really impressive. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that I just haven't heard, but someone of his status under the age of 30, there's very few I've ever heard speak like this guy before. Really, really talented guy. But for those of you who don't know who Nick Fuentes is, Nick Fuentes, I believe, is 27 years old. He's a conservative kid from Chicago, grew up in a middle class Catholic family. He would go to Boston University, and I believe during his freshman year, he would announce that he was going to vote for Trump. This was back in 2015, 2016, and this is at 18 years old when he got banned from everything. So he's been dealing with this for a while, and it would be why he's at Boston University, if I'm remembering correctly, where he would debate the student government president at the time on politics. And it was here, for the most part, where he would realize that a lot of conservative-leaning students on campus at Boston University actually did not agree with his stance and felt like he was a bit radical.
I was supposed to be entering Boston University for my sophomore year, but in response to recent death threats and threats against my physical safety, I decided that might not be the best idea. When you start receiving death threats to the extent that I have, it just becomes a liability to my brand, to my academic success, and everything else.
So then I believe he would leave Boston University after his freshman year, right? And he would eventually start something called AFPAC, which stands for America First. And he would just continue to gain popularity. And at some point, the people like Ben Shapiro and the Daily Wire was looking at this guy. A lot of people were saying he was on the up and coming, he was on the rise. But then he started to get a lot of pushback because he figured out quickly that on the right, you are not allowed to ask certain questions about certain group of people, just like on the left, you're not allowed to ask certain questions when it comes to a lot of isms like sexism, racism. He learned that for himself.
I said, why does the United States give Israel $3.8 billion per year? What do you make of this whole arrangement? I said, is it because they are our closest ally and I'm missing something? I said, or are we being lobbied? And there's this deep contradiction and double standard, and it's obviously being enforced by foreign influence and money. And I remember they hated the line of questioning.
And when you say they, you're referring to this friend group?
Yes,
okay.
This Daily Wire friend group. They were all writers there, and you could still find their articles online. And they, at first it was sort of playful. They said, oh, haha, very good. They almost thought I was joking. They said, oh, it's very funny, but you really shouldn't ask that, they would say. They'd say, there's a good answer for all those questions. They'd say, but the way you're asking it is anti-Semitic, they said. And, we're happy to talk with you one-on-one in person, like they're going to teach me how to ask a question. They said, because the way you're saying it, it sounds hateful and it's wrong.
And so he started AFPAC essentially because he would eventually be banned from C.I.A. and Turning Point USA, which we'll get to a little bit later in the video, because Turning Point USA is ran by Charlie Kirk, who I believe is petrified of Nick Fuentes, but we'll get there. Donald Trump. Nick Fuentes has been saying publicly for some time now that he was not only disappointed in Donald Trump's presidency this year, but he was very much so disappointed the first time around.
And now he says, if you're not on board with the Epstein cover-up, oh, I don't want your support. You're a weakling. Fuck you. Fuck you. You suck. You are fat. You are a joke. You are stupid. You are not funny. You are not as smart as you think you are. You are, and honestly, and if you watch my show, I've been very critical. I've never been this far. This just goes to show this entire thing has been a scam. When we look back on the history of populism in America, we are going to look back on the MAGA movement as the biggest scam in American history. And the liberals were right. The MAGA supporters were had. They were.
Because for those of you who follow politics, at least loosely enough, you will remember that a lot of conservatives were saying that the reason why Donald Trump wasn't able to get the wall built, the reason why he wasn't able to accomplish a lot of things the first term was because he was new. It was his first time. He's not a politician. He's not a traditional politician, right? He didn't know who to trust. He didn't know how things worked, right? People took advantage of him. So now that he was running again for the 2020 slot, then he will be able to get back into the White House and do the things that he now know how to accomplish that he wanted to get done the first presidency. Well, of course, as we know, he would not win the election in 2020. So here he is back into the office this time. Nick Fuentes has been very public and very vocal about the fact that he believes that, in so many words, Donald Trump is owned by Israel. He's paid off by Israel as well. And Donald Trump is not who we think he is. He calls Donald Trump the Matrix president, right? So essentially, Donald Trump was selected, right? In so many words, he was chosen to be in the position that he is because he was able to trick a great majority of the conservative party by his non-traditional style and his anti-neocon and anti-establishment persona that he had built for himself. But Nick Fuentes believes that everything that Trump has been doing in his presidency this year, since he's been back in office, has been for the most part the opposite of America First and everything that he campaigned on. J.D. Vance. He's talked about J.D. Vance. He says that J.D. Vance is not only not who we think he is, but J.D. Vance is essentially has been created. He's a creation by a guy by the name of Peter Thiel. We talked about him when it came to Palantir, which is Palantir, this surveillance organization that had a lot to do with the LA riots that we talked about on this channel a couple of different times. And he shared that it's just very strange when you look into the history of J.D. Vance and you find out that, because I remember just outside of Nick Fuentes when he was elected or selected as the vice president, I had a lot of people in my life that are liberal that was very, very shocked about it because they liked his book and they just didn't understand the selection by Donald Trump. And Nick Fuentes spoke to this. He said, hey, when you look at J.D. Vance's history, he not only was he extremely liberal, not only did he support things like affirmative action, but he was in the military, didn't do combat, he didn't participate in combat. He was essentially in journalism as part of the military. Yet he was so important that very high-ranking people were writing articles about him, saying that he had a bright future in the GOP and in politics. And at the time, it just made no sense why they would be writing this about this random journalist who was in the military. Nick Fuentes is saying, hey, look, I'm telling you right now, I think it's because they were setting him up. They were creating him to be in the position that he's in because J.D. Vance was selected by or recommended by Elon Musk and one other individual. That's who Trump supposedly took their word for who he should select as his vice president. And Nick Fuentes has essentially said, we shouldn't trust anything that J.D. Vance stands for, anything that he's saying, because essentially, much like what I talked about in my Martin Luther King documentary, the people that we see are speaking for their sponsors and their funders.
Because there was an interesting article in The Atlantic a few weeks ago. It said the end of the Jewish golden age. Mm-hmm. And it talked about how the Jewish people 100 years ago were the biggest opponents of the marriage of the Christian religion and the state. Mm-hmm. Why do you think that is? Because if the state is Christian, it would be a little bit exclusionary towards Jews who aren't Christian. Right. They were also the biggest advocates of the civil rights movement. Why? Because the more tolerant that America is, the more liberal, the more open it is, safer they are. If it's a country that's all about Europeans and Christians, well, Jews are neither European nor are they Christian. They're not racially or ethnically European. They're not religiously Christian. So they sort of used black civil rights. They used women's suffrage. They used the anti-establishment clause, basically to undermine American civil society, to make it a place that is more hospitable to their own people. And they freely admit this in this article and in other places.
Nick Fuentes believes this about J.D. Vance as well.
Like I said, I'm going through my notes on J.D. Vance and I'm asking myself, who is J.D. Vance? And you should look into him as well. There's a really interesting article about Vance that was written by David Frum a few years ago. And for those that don't know, David Frum is your prototypical liberal Jewish neocon Republican, like Ben Shapiro, but more liberal. He worked in the George W. Bush administration, and in the late 2000s, early 2010s, he was championing a kind of conservatism that was socially inclusive, environmentally friendly. He's like the definition of a cuck-servative, and he's a Jewish neocon, straight out of the Bush 43 White House, for those that don't know. So David Frum writes an article about J.D. Vance. I think this was last year, a couple years ago. It was in The Atlantic. And it turns out that Vance was writing for Frum in 2011. When J.D. Vance was in his mid-20s, after he left the Marines, before he went to Yale Law School, Vance was writing for Frum. And he was writing, among other things, in defense of affirmative action, writing in defense of the war in Iraq. He was a neocon. He wrote 6 articles for From in 2011, 15 years ago, when he was my age. And again, pro-Iraq war, pro-affirmative action. The guy was as liberal as neocon as Republicans can be. But it gets better because people can change their views over time, and we understand that, and we'll get to that. But what's really peculiar about the article is that From says that despite Vance, at this point in his life, not having any kind of national profile, not being anybody, at this point, he's just some veteran who was in the Marines and a blogger. And we don't even know how they met. We don't know how they got in touch. But at this point, at this very early stage, before Vance went to law school, before he wrote Hillbilly Elegy, before he's anybody, David Frum writes that everybody on his team believes that Vance will play an important role in national politics as the leader of moderate conservatism, that Vance would recapture the GOP from the Tea Party and from the populists for the moderates. And I'm sort of reading this, and it would be easy to gloss over, but knowing about the timeline of his life, you have to wonder, what would make someone like David Frum, a Jewish neocon, believe that a 25-year-old veteran who was really a journalist in the Marines, didn't even see combat, what would make him think that this obscure blogger would play a national role in politics leading moderate conservatism? His articles were that good?
And J.D. Vance is aware that he has been saying these things about him, because J.D. Vance has come out on Twitter and said, hey, I know he has said a lot of things about me that I disagree with, but I still feel like he should have the right to say whatever he wants. Charlie Kirk. I believe Charlie Kirk, we talked about Charlie Kirk several times on this channel. I do believe everything I'm saying in this video is alleged. I do believe that Charlie Kirk is controlled. And I think he's been exposed many times this year, more so than any other year. I believe over the past 4 years, it's probably been the best 4 years of his career, because the left was in the White House, and he just had an infinite amount of opportunities to go on these college campuses, debate these college students, things like gender, affirmative action, immigration, things of that sort. But now that Donald Trump is in the White House, and Charlie Kirk, who's supposed to be America First, has this unprecedented allegiance to Israel like we've never seen before. And it's quite, not only is it a contradiction, but it's a blatant contradiction, because he goes above and beyond to say that he's not for things like affirmative action and DEI, things of that sort, but he's talking about special treatment to Jewish people in this country, and he supports foreign aid to Israel, even though nobody can really answer the question with a substantive answer. Why do we support, why is Israel our biggest ally? How? What do America gain from being in these wars, bombing Iran on behalf of Israel? What do we get out of it?
So I have a question. So from America First perspective, why do we give $3.8 billion to Israel, which is more aid than we've given to Africa, more aid than we've given to South America, and more aid than we've given to the Caribbean combined, which is home to 1 billion poor people, especially when they deliberately attacked the USS Liberty in the 1970s.
That is incorrect. Do not peddle conspiracy theories in our event. That is not acceptable. Do not say that.
Okay, Dean Rusk disagrees with you, and he was the Secretary of State at the time, but that's fine.
I never myself accepted the Israeli purported explanation. Accidents don't occur through repeated attacks by surface vessels and by aircraft. It obviously was a decision taken pretty high up on the Israeli side.
That is incorrect. Do not peddle conspiracy theories in our event.
A lot of it, we believe, was covered up. That it was an intentional act by Israel to sink the ship with all hands, no survivors.
That is incorrect. Do not peddle conspiracy theories in our event.
They shouldn't be called an ally. They don't deserve it.
Why do you think they would have bombed the ship?
Their next plan was to attack the Golan Heights. So the troops they had on the Sinai now had to be moved to take the Golan Heights. The fact that the Israelis were massacring Egyptian troops, Egyptian prisoners of war. They had so many of them, and once again, they wanted to move all the troops they could to the Syrian border, and they couldn't handle the Egyptian prisoners of war, so they massacred them.
That is incorrect. Do not peddle conspiracy theories in our event.
George Ball, the brilliant and courageous Undersecretary of State at the time of the '67 war, wrote about the attack on the Liberty subsequently. He said, "The ultimate lesson of the Liberty attack was that it had far more effect on policy in Israel than in America. Israel's leaders concluded that nothing they might do would offend the Americans to the point of reprisal. If America's leaders did not have the courage to punish Israel for the blatant murder of American citizens, it seemed clear that their American friends would let them get away with almost anything."
Guess what? The world's a better place because of Israel. The Jews run everything. Why is there so much anti-Semitism?
Because anti-Semitism is a construct created by the New World Order agenda that is being pushed onto us.
You know, so Jews, it's kind of like global warming. And your theory is very similar to global warming. If it gets warmer, it's global warming. If it gets cooler, it's global warming. If there's anti-Semitism, it's the Jews. If there's no anti-Semitism, it's the Jews. We send money to Hamas, it's the Jews. We send money to Israel, it's the Jews. So at some point you have to tell me, like, they basically control everything, whether it hurts them or it helps them. Is that correct?
Charlie Kirk is supposed to be against DEI, but he's saying absolutely nothing and has no problem with the anti-Semitism bill on college campuses that Donald Trump passed earlier this year. He can almost say nothing and absolutely hates the conversation when it comes to racism against black people. He thinks the left has abused that term, which I agree with, but he don't even want to talk about that at all, as if it don't even exist. It's not that big of a deal. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. But when it comes to Israel and Jewish individuals on college campuses, all of a sudden he's for DEI. All of a sudden he's for sending foreign aid, these billions of dollars, to the state of Israel, when our country progressively gets worse every year, or regressively gets worse every year. He don't like the term racism, but every single chance he gets, he goes out of his way as a so-called white American to say, there's no place in this country for anti-Semitism. We will not tolerate it under any circumstances.
Also, I think we all agreed October 7th was awful. It was terrible and should be talked about more, and it needs to be emphasized. We also agree this Jew hate stuff has no place in public discourse, period. End of story. And I don't like it. It's disgusting, and we need to call it out when we see it.
Listen to me. You only talk like that when you're paid off. You only talk like that when you know you got a big paycheck coming from the people who want you to say things like that. Nick Fuentes agrees. Not to mention that he's essentially banned Nick Fuentes. He's ducking and dodging where people got to call into his show and lie about the reason that they're calling in just so they can ask the question, when are you going to debate Nick Fuentes, bro? You say you're America first. Nick Fuentes says he's America first. Debate him. You duck and smoke. If he shows up to your Turning Point USA conventions, you have him banned. You already have him on a list to where if they even see him show up, he's escorted out of the building.
Let's go to Nathaniel. Nathaniel, thank you so much for being a member. What's on your mind?
Hi, Charlie. As a TPUSA chapter founder and president, I've seen firsthand how the tide is turning among young conservatives. I say, if you truly believe in open debate in the marketplace of ideas, will you ever be willing to debate Nick Fuentes, or will you wait until his movement forces you to adopt his talking points, as we've seen already?
You know, it's funny. I personally do not give a platform to bad faith actors. And I had a whole open about this. And by the way, a really important thing is not to lie and to not bear false testimony. It's fine. I'll answer your question. You know, you said, I want to have a question about Turning Point events. And you obviously lied about your question. Doesn't surprise me because you have deceit. But you know what? Honestly, I'm asked that question all the time. I don't platform trolls. And I don't platform and I don't discuss people or I don't debate with people that are not good faith actors. And
you debate Maoists and people who champion.
They can keep on yelling at how successful we are and our big events and well over 1,000 employees. But there's a lot of jealousy out there. We build, they complain. We succeed, we win. They blame the Jews.
Tucker Carlson. He's exposed Tucker Carlson multiple different times, exposing the fact that essentially Tucker Carlson has been a part of the establishment for many years. He worked for Fox News for many years. I believe he used to work for CNN. And probably the biggest blow is Tucker Carlson's dad used to work for the CIA. and Tucker Carlson being caught in a lie, stating that he didn't find this out until either right before or right after his dad passed away. But now that's been proven to be a lie. You did know, and you stated yourself that you knew a very long time ago that your dad was a part of the CIA, bro.
And he's attacking my dad as a CIA, his dad's in the CIA or whatever. And I'm like, well, that's no, untrue. And my father dies, and I learn, actually, yeah, was involved in that world. I was completely shocked by it. So no one has to believe me, but that's just a fact.
Right.
This was in March of this year. And so when I applied to CIA, and I've taken a lot of crap, including from Putin, like, oh, you're from a CIA family. Well, yeah, obviously my father worked in conjunction with CIA. I mean, that's what that is. And I tried to join the CIA.
He had a bunch of them. He ran the Voice of America for a long time, maybe 5 or 6 years. He was an ambassador in Africa, and then he ran something called the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
I mean, the guy who took out Mossadegh lived on my street. The Roosevelt CIA officer. So, I mean, again, I grew up around this stuff, but that's why it's not happening.
But they seem to be doing
so many other things. I mean, I applied to CIA. My dad worked with CIA. I was never against CIA. I thought only like dumb liberals were against CIA, and traitors or whatever. So my views on CIA have evolved based on things that I have seen and personally experienced.
You took a pretty well publicized trip with your father. Was that about 1.5 years ago? How long has it been?
Since we were in Pakistan.
Down to Nicaragua for the summer and work and, get involved in the war, and support the side that we thought was right.
Where you got left behind for a couple days.
Oh, no, that was when I went to Vietnam with John McCain. Yeah, I had a hassle at the airport.
And are you still traveling with your father on trips?
We spent the summer in Nicaragua trying to get a sense of the war there, and all kinds of hilarity ensued. But yourself, my father's a great guy to travel with, and very amusing and adventurous person who's up for anything. So I said, let's go to Pakistan. Okay.
And we have the internet to expose the lies. If this isn't 20 years ago when you were on CNN, and we couldn't expose things, we can expose it now, and they still do it.
Well, I guess I would ask myself, I lie. If I'm really cornered or something, I lie. I try never to lie on TV. I just don't, I don't like lying. I certainly do it, out of weakness or whatever.
And do you expect us to believe that not only did you not know this, not only did you support the Iraq war, yes, people can change their opinions, but this drastic change from you going from working for Fox News, dad being a part of the CIA, supporting the Iraq war, to now you're talking about, one of the biggest problems in America nowadays, and that's credit. A lot of people are dealing with credit debt or debt from credit cards and ways that we can get that decreased in this country. Rolling up your sleeve, pretending that you're the average, everyday working middle class man when you've never been that. Yes, Tucker Carlson says a lot of things that I agree with, but Nick Fuentes raises a great question. Why now? You expect us to believe that after 20 years or however long it's been, now you're noticing these things? I'm 27 if you're Nick Fuentes. I'm 27 years old. I've been saying this since I was 18. So essentially 10 years, the last decade I've been saying this. You were around 15 years before me. Why weren't you saying this? You hadn't noticed any of this stuff before I came along? Nick Fuentes is spot on about that. Candace Owens. Him and Candace Owens have been going back and forth. I feel very weird about his back and forth with Candace Owens because he makes a great point. A lot of people have said when Candace Owens interviewed Nick Fuentes, she dropped the ball. Essentially because she decided to ask him a lot of questions that were about him instead of about important questions pertaining to the country, where the country is, where we're headed, how you feel about politics. She didn't ask enough of those questions, and that I agree with. I haven't seen the entire interview, but I've seen a lot of clips. And even the part where she seems to scold him or give him a little bit of pushback because of the fact that he's not married and not prioritizing starting a family. I agree with him and the others who say, who are you to question him? He gets to do what he wants, and you're a woman. Yes, as adults and as Americans, we're going to share similar problems. But let's be clear, the human experience for a man in 2025 is not the same human experience for a woman in 2025. Drastically different problems and challenges in this country. I 100% agree with that. So I think Candace won't even begin to understand what it's like to be a mid-20-year-old to a late 20-year-old, 30-year-old man in this country, especially when it comes to dating, because it's a completely different world now as opposed to 20, 30 years ago. The black community He went off on the black community. He was going viral. He's went viral for a lot of things lately. A lot of people have even created entire YouTube channels and have essentially created YouTube careers, gaining tens of thousands of subscribers on YouTube simply for posting Nick Fuentes videos. I mean, some of them are pretty good and they're pretty informed themselves, because Nick Fuentes is the articulate and in many cases the intelligent version of many of these young white Americans, young white American men, not just white American men that follow him and support him and agree with him. Many different young men from all different walks of life, including myself, agree with Nick Fuentes on a plethora of different topics. But it's specifically the young white male population that's his biggest core base, and it's because he's able to articulate in a way that many of them cannot the biggest challenges that they're facing in this country. But anyways, he went viral for talking about the black community and many of the problems in the black community, to the point where he even had a back and forth with Officer Tatum.
In the comment section, let me know, do you think he have a point about some of the things he's saying?
The reason that people have negative attitudes about black people is because most people's interactions with black people are negative.
Most
people's interactions with black people is when you're stuck in traffic and you see a Nissan Altima speeding down the shoulder. And you say, what the f***? You're not supposed to do that. But it's like these people have no respect for decorum. They think the rules don't apply to them. They have no respect for society.
I think that Nick Fuentes is 100% true, or telling 100% truth for certain black people. Like if you've ever lived in America long enough to be around different groups of people, live in diverse cities, you realize this is not most black people, but it is sections of black communities and experiences that people are having with black people like this. I think black people do this more than anybody else do it per capita, but this is not every black person is like this. Like we went to IHOP when we were in Orlando, Florida. The black people in there were ghetto, but they were nice. Not every black person that's in the hood is a bad person. I grew up in the hood. Most black people in the hood don't like the black people that are acting up. Most black people in the hood are not acting up. It's the ones that act up get the most attention. I think that Nick Fuentes is 100% correct when it comes to the N's. N-words act like this. N-words are rude. And I think Nick Fuentes is an example, in my opinion, of a person who only have a certain amount of experiences with black people, not the totality of how black people operate. He's never been in a neighborhood where black people are normal. He's probably experiencing black people hood, thug, N-words. And then now he's saying black people are like this. Most people interaction with black people are negative.
And I want to make sure that I state here that I think Nick Fuentes shared a lot of things in that clip that was absolutely true, but I absolutely agree with Officer Tatum. I think the group that he's talking about is a subculture or a subpopulation of the so-called black community that is overrepresented in media by design, by the way. That's on purpose. And then the ones that he just so happens to run into in public are absolutely of the hood culture. That is not most so-called black Americans. It's just not. The group that he's talking about, I have a problem with. I've made countless videos on this channel talking about, but I think what's happened is his limited experience with the so-called black community, he's ran with it as a so-called white American that hasn't had to grow up around them. So he don't understand that it's a lot of us that look at that so-called subculture of the group, the community as well, the same way that he looks at them. But he wouldn't look at, if you was a so-called white American, poor white American, and you grew up in the trailer park community and that's all you knew up until college, you're not going to, for all those years, say that that's most white people that do drugs, do meth, rob and steal from people. You wouldn't say that. Loud and ghetto, have emotional issues. You wouldn't say that. Now, let's talk about some of my issues with Nick Fuentes. And this part shouldn't take too long at all. My first problem with Nick Fuentes is I think Nick Fuentes has mastered and he's grown extremely comfortable with being the underdog, right? I think because of what he's experienced in this country, particularly from the media, many of those in the conservative party who supposedly was on his side, I think he's very angry. But I think because of the large following that he's grown, despite being banned off many different platforms, I don't think he wants to be friends with people. I think to the point where even those that are on his side and that are calling out Israel, agrees with him on a lot of different topics, he finds a way to disagree with them. He finds a way to criticize them. And that's essentially how I was just watching him criticize Marjorie Taylor Greene the other day, and it just confused me. I'm like, he makes some great points. She goes out of her way to make sure that people don't think that she's anti-Semitic. And his opinion is, why? Anti-Semitism, anti-Semitic is not only a made-up word, but essentially we don't even know what it means. Not only because it has so many different meanings, but essentially because who's a Semite, right? Palestinians are technically Semites. Many people argue that Black Americans are Semites, right? Some people argue that many Arabs and other people that's in Israel are Semites. So who does it apply to? Because it seems that that word is only used for white Jewish individuals. But I think these semantics, the point is she's going after Israel and she's taking a lot of flack for it. I think that's a win. It's not like she's against you. I think you should take that. And I think that's what happened with the Candace Owens interview, because his followers are going to support him for the most part, even when he's wrong. Like he made fun of Candace Owens' Brigitte Macron, Becoming Brigitte series, which is one of the most incredible documentaries series that I've seen on YouTube, probably ever. Like, the research in that documentary is that incredible. I don't care how you feel about Candace personally. It's an incredible documentary. He essentially made fun of her for being a conspiracy theorist. Really, bro? Really? This is what I'm saying, like, finding reasons. Candace Owens spoke about this on the Tucker show. She said they had a great interview, right? Of course, they had a bit back and forth. Of course, she knew his opinions on race. She knew his opinions on Israel. She knew his opinions on all these things before he came onto the show, for the most part, which is why she invited him on. She said they had a great interview. They talked behind the scenes. She provided proof from the DMs that they had where she told him about the controversial trailer that they were going to put together for the interview. And then it wasn't until after he left her house where she said her and her husband even contemplating asking him to stick around to have dinner with them, because I believe he came alone. And she said it was only after he left, after having a great conversation on and off camera, that he completely flipped on her. And she was like, what happened?
I mean, I can tell you my experience was entirely fraudulent with him. I never interview people as a gotcha interview. It's always just that he was making the rounds. He's been around for a while, and kind of his story, when I learned it, because he was banned from everywhere, so I didn't actually know what the backstory was with Nick Fuentes, but then I learned it when he was allowed back on X, and Jeremy Boring, who was then the CEO of Daily Wire, did this X live with him. And
Jeremy Boring did an event with Nick Fuentes?
It was weird. Everything was weird about what happened, but it happened. And Nick told his story, and I was listening in, and said essentially that he was canceled because he started asking questions about Israel. He was 18 years old, and he alleged that it was, very much the fault of the Daily Wire or whatever he said. And I found it to be very interesting. And I was like, oh, I actually didn't know this was the backstory. Like, maybe this really is a person who had, just ahead of everybody else, was questioning Israel and had like a bad hand given to him. So I had him on the show, welcomed him into my home, and he was very nice. We told him we're going to cut a controversial trailer. We're going to show you like these clips of you talking trash about me, and you can talk about whatever you want for as long as you want. Ask any questions you want to ask. It went great. He left. He said, thanks. We can now be friends. And I am not kidding. We published this 11 days later, and I don't even know how to, he just starts screaming, calling me an effing bitch, who set him up. We didn't edit a single thing. Those 11 days, like 2 weeks before we even published the interview, we told him if there's anything that he wanted us to insert. Like, nobody does that if you go on their show.
Yes.
And I genuinely don't know what triggered him, other than me at the very end asking him about or talking to him about family. And it was just the rage that was coming out of him was just weird. And I don't know why he did that. I don't know why he did a 180. You had access to me. You could have said anything after. Even if he had said in good faith, I thought I sounded a little weird here, could you cut it out? We probably would have cut it out, because I just don't want people to ever not have a good experience coming on our show.
That.
You know what I'm saying?
And also, you want people, I'll speak for myself. When I invite someone on, especially just to hear their views, I want them to be able to express what they actually think.
Right. Exactly.
And you decide what you think, and you decide how to express it. I mean, that's like a basic human right, kind of.
Yeah.
And so I'm not here to trip you up into saying something you don't mean. I want to hear what you do mean.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So,
and he told the story. He did all of that. And apparently then, and I don't know if it was driven by insecurity. He didn't know how his followers would take the interview, but he just did a complete 180. Lied to his audience, pretended that he was surprised it was behind a paywall. We spoke about him and how we were going to release it. He said, great. I mean, it's a total 180 flip. So I can now say that I didn't listen to other people say that Nick was a bad person. I didn't care about what happened when he was 18, 19, 20, 26. I sat across from a person, had a conversation with him. He behaved one way in person and then put on a show for the internet. So I actually can say my experience with Nick Fuentes is that he's a terrible person and a terrible human being, because why would you do that? There's no reason to do that.
I agree.
You could have come back onto the show. You could have had beginning of us discussing various topics. I think in many ways, whatever happened to him when he was 18 may have stunted his growth, meaning that he now is responding to the internet, which is filled with people that don't even use their real names. Right? So really, truly, the irony of it all is you could just be like the IDF soldiers just pretending to be his supporters and just getting him to say whatever you want because he's going to do whatever you say. But it was strange. It was totally strange. It made no sense. And
Does
I just
he
went,
have a family or a normal life?
I asked him about that. He said, yeah, it comes from a 2-parent household. That's what he told me.
No. Does he have his own family? Does he?
No, he's not married. And I just offered to him, I was like, I think these are things that you learn when you're married. And he just was vicious about it. And,
about
women
what?
don't tell me what to do or whatever it was. And it was very performative. Like I said the exact same thing to Andrew Tate months earlier. I had him and I said, you should get married. Here's why. And of course, Andrew Tate did not react like that. He told me what his hangups were about marriage. It was just a part of two people communicating on a show. But for whatever reason, he saw this as like an attack, even though.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was weird. It was totally weird.
Who is this kid exactly?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it's just an accident that the guy exclusively goes after people who are in roughly the same. And then he gets up there and he's like, making Holocaust jokes. And it's like, is it possible that this is like David Duke? And David Duke, every time I had a new show, David Duke would endorse my show. I don't know. Who the hell is David Duke? Well, David Duke is obviously part of a campaign to discredit people on the right, obviously. And I think it's very obvious that Nick Fuentes is exactly the same. Doesn't mean everything he says is false. It doesn't mean he's not talented. He's enormously talented. Doesn't mean he's a bad person. I'm not attacking him personally, but he is clearly part of a campaign to discredit non-crazy right voices. That's obvious to me. I've been around a long time. I know it when I see it.
Yeah, and I will say I don't understand it. We were very kind to him. Like I truly, we almost said we felt maybe he was a bit lonely. We should invite him back for dinner. That's how good of an experience I had.
Clearly it's
and then it was a 180. So it's either A, it's being driven from a little boy insecurity, and he just was so worried that he just went on the attack because he doesn't know how to have normal relations after being banned everywhere.
Well, I think there's
that could be one element.
The angry gay kid thing going on. Yeah.
Or it's what you're saying, where he does this, he's lying to everybody and pretending that things are one way when it's not. I can say
why is he attacking Joe?
I can confirm he's dishonest. There's no, so it's like you use that as your, I could not determine what his motives were. And I said, you know what? I don't have time for this. I gave you a fair chance, gave you a fair shake, and you are a fundamentally dishonest human being. There was no reason to do it. If he had not done that show and screamed and yelled, his followers would have been like, oh, that was an interesting conversation between two people who agreed some, disagreed some, and that was it. It was interesting that he got there. He doesn't want to be, and I can tell you that he doesn't want to be anywhere but where he is. He doesn't want to have normal relations. And it did sort of feel, and I said that to him, that he's responding to orders somewhere.
So now Candace Owens has been going above and beyond to debate this guy, but he refuses to do it. And she's even giving him the opportunity to debate Charlie Kirk as a 2-par to debating her. He turned it down. The racism thing. Nick Fuentes claims that he's Catholic, which I can get into that. I don't understand how he's intelligent and as well researched as he is, and he's Catholic. This isn't about attacking you if you're Catholic. I'm a follower of Jesus. You claim to be a follower of Jesus. I think that's what's most important. So I've already made a video on Catholicism, so I won't even digress into that. But he claims to be Catholic. In my opinion, I don't think he's Catholic. No, I believe he was raised in a Catholic home, and I think that's what he's identifying with, his family identity in Catholicism. And what I mean by that is, it seems to me that Nick Fuentes identifies as a Catholic, says all the things for the most part at times that a Christian is supposed to believe in, but then when you watch his live streams, which he's on Rumble and Twitter for the most part, Nick Fuentes, he uses an absurd amount of vulgarity. To the point, cursing does not make you. Using vulgar or speaking vulgar does not make you a bad person. But I think it does represent you and speak to your character. If you're using every other live stream, sometimes your entire live stream, you're dropping F-bombs, MF-er bombs, You're using the B word, the SHIT word. I mean, every curse word you can think of, but not only that, in many cases, he's calling people these names. Bro, it's confusing to me. For the longest, he claims that he's not a racist, he's a racialist, which essentially means that he don't believe that one race is superior to another race. He just believes that there are inherent differences amongst each race. So-called black individuals are probably the least intellectual inherently. As to say, there is nothing that they can do for the most part. You have exceptions to the rule. You're going to have extremely intellectual so-called black individuals. But for the most part, they're probably going to fall on the bottom of the totem pole when it comes to intellect because of inherent differences, not just because of culture. He talked about this on the Candace show.
So you don't think that there's group differences on average between the races?
I think, just to be clear, I think there would be group differences if you took it, like we were talking about, an American versus somebody who graduates college in Europe. There'd be tremendous differences. Not
tremendous, but yeah, there would be slight differences.
Yeah.
But you don't think that
that
racially there's differences between races?
I think, yeah, because we have huge differences culturally. So going to your point of saying, I don't want to live in a black neighborhood, well, neither does LeBron James when he gets money, right? And there's a reason for that, because there is something that's happening culturally in Black America that's been going on for a very long time. But that thing, I would argue, didn't exist in...
What about in Africa and Haiti? I mean, they're killing and eating each other in Africa and Haiti. Everywhere where they are, you have these problems.
Yeah, I'd like to look into, and I'm pleading ignorant, but I've heard some things about what happened in Haiti and what the Clinton Foundation did there. So I think I'd have to look more into the history of Haiti to be able to push back on that at all. I don't think I agree with that.
What about all of Africa then? There's not one country in sub-Saharan Africa that's successful. Not one. They're all least developed countries. They're all failed states.
This kind of reminds me, and we could kind of flesh out this conversation together, and I'm not perhaps ready to have it fully, but I do remember going back to Dave Smith where he was conceding a point on, well, all of these other Middle Eastern countries, no, you wouldn't want to live there. You'd want to live in Israel. In my mind, I'm going, well, because you just keep bombing the crap out of them if they ever try to get ahead. I remember watching this clip of him saying that, going, why don't these countries get ahead? And kind of going back in my mind to the Gaddafi speech where he was speaking essentially about, here's what we got to do in Libya to get ahead. Here's what we're going to do with the dollar, and we're going to be progressive and this and that. And they killed him. And then what happened to those Libyan refugees? Suddenly they're now pouring into, just like he said was going to happen, that they're now pouring into the European continent, and Europeans are complaining, who are these people? And so the question is, are we allowing, because I'm like, Africa's a pretty rich country. Like, why aren't Africans controlling the diamond trade? Who's taking all of the diamonds so that they can't control the diamond trade? And how long have these people been doing that, being essentially culture vultures? That's kind of the journey that I've been on now in terms of really trying to go back and look into history to see what's happened. And I never trust myself when I have a perspective now, because I realize how much of my opinions and beliefs were shaped by the public school system. And so I don't think you're right. I think that there has been a very sophisticated effort to, just like you would say now, in terms of people that are intentionally attacking Anglo-Saxons. I'm just learning about that there were these books that were written to, we must genocide the Anglo-Saxons, that were going on for a lot longer than I realized. History didn't begin with World War II, but I think it would take a lot of time to kind of unpack that.
Yeah.
Like, are we stopping people from getting ahead just because, I don't know.
That just sounds, I mean, being honest with you, that just sounds to me like a left-wing argument when they say, why don't these countries get ahead? Colonialism, you're a colonizer. It's like, okay, but when we got there, they had no development. When we got to Africa, they had no technological development.
So you think that
history.
Even if we weren't at war, and sure, you could say that you think that's a leftist argument. I would only push back on that because I've learned so much about just like recent history that I didn't know. But you think that the Middle East, like if we had done nothing in terms of the Middle East, that they would just be savages and just be like, America didn't do anything it doesn't set anything backwards, and you're just like bombing a place.
Yeah, kind of. I think that we did set them back because when they don't have political order, it prevents development and investment and things like that. But, again, when you look at the antecedents of all these, the history didn't start, like you said, with World War II in the 20th century. There's a reason that European civilization created this enormous gap between them and everybody else. And I don't think it was that it was white supremacy or it was unfair or something like that. I think it's because Europeans are smarter.
While stating that those that are at the top of that list are, I believe, Asian and so-called European descent. Now, I'm one of those people, even if something hurts my feelings, I'm one of those people on this channel, you all should know this about me by now. Is it true? Can you back this up with data, statistics, evidence? Let me see it. Let me analyze it. And if it's true, it's true. I'll accept it. This, not only I don't believe it's true, but whether it's true or not, it's just, what's the purpose of sharing that information? Not that there's ever a bad time to tell the truth, but what's your purpose of sharing that? What's your agenda? What's your motive, right? What do you expect to gain from sharing that information? Because as a person that claims to follow Jesus, a person that claims to be under the Catholicism faith, it seems to me that you are the very thing that the left has weaponized, the term that the left has weaponized, but it's very much so a real thing, a white supremacist. I know you identify as a white nationalist, but even on the show, Candace's show, he said, you know, for the longest, I've called myself a racialist. But at this point, I just say I'm racist. Who openly says that unless they have fully embraced the underdog, the bad guy, the villain status? Fame does this to people. Attention does this to people. When you've already been banned from all these different places, you may as well just come all the way out and be who you truly are. And I want to make sure that I say this as well. Nick Fuentes says a lot of things that white conservatives feel, but are too afraid to say. That's a fact. I want to make sure that I say that. A lot of white conservatives feel the same way that he does when it comes to race, when it comes to politics, when it comes to the elite Jewish power in this country. But a lot of them are just too afraid to say it because of the direction that the country has been headed. So I want to make sure that we put that out there as well. And I definitely can't end this video without saying this as well. Like, his last name is so confusing to me. Maybe he's explained it and I've missed it, so forgive me if he's done this. But Fuentes. It's so funny because people typically hop in the comment section and say, why is he talking all this white nationalist talk when his last name is Fuentes? Like, I believe it has like Spanish roots or something. Like, is he Spanish? Is he part Hispanic? Like, I'm not really for sure about that. Maybe I'm sure he's spoken on it, but I haven't been able to find any clips on it. So you all let me know, but it seems to me with a last name like Fuentes, it's just not the most traditional white American last name that you'll hear. And here's the thing. Here's my biggest gripe with Nick Fuentes. Nick Fuentes is extremely talented. I believe he's extremely bold. I think he's a truth teller. I think he's unapologetic. I think he says what he feels for the most part. And he's taken a lot of, flack for it, a lot of punishment for it, if you will. But if you're going to spend all this time being banned for saying that you believe that the Jewish oligarchs are controlling this world, essentially. He said the world, especially this country, when it comes to the health industry, Hollywood, politics, our foreign policy, media. If you're going to go out your way to not only say these things, but quote unquote back these things up with what you claim to be evidence, which a lot of it I agree with when it comes to the elite Jewish oligarchs. I agree with you. But here's the problem, bro. If you're going to say this and exercise your free speech to say it and suffer the consequences for it, I won't believe a single word that you say going forward until you talk about the Freemasons. You can't be talking about who's running the world and who's controlling things in this country if you're not going to talk about the Freemasons. See, one thing about me on this channel, number one, is I show my face. A lot of you all's favorite channels that talk about the things that we talk about on this channel, they don't show their face. And it's not a knock to them. I don't blame them. They should not show their face. But that's a risk that I'm willing to take. I'm very well aware. I may come off as naive at times, but I know what I'm doing. I have protection with me. I know what I'm doing. So if anybody come at me incorrectly, come correct. I know what I'm doing when I'm with the topics that we cover on this channel. It's a dangerous game. My YouTube channel could be taken from me any day. But it's very difficult for me to hear him give all this attention to the elite Jewish members of society, which deserve a lot of attention. Absolutely, brother. But how dare you not even speak or mention Freemasons? The evidence, I've created an entire YouTube channel off of it. It's everywhere. The signs are everywhere, bro. But I don't believe I've ever seen him, so forgive me. I don't think I've ever seen him dedicate an entire episode and dedicate an entire series to talk about the power and the influence that Freemasons have in just about every facet of society today. How the direction that we're headed in this country is all by design, and it all goes back and it leads back to Freemasons. Which reminds me, the algorithm. One thing, I have a Candace Owens video that I have to explain to a lot of people in the comment section often, because they say, man, I just watched you defend Candace Owens in 2 or 3 videos, and now here you are making this video. Did somebody pay you to make this video about Candace? No. I said at the beginning of that video, I'll say it again, 2 things can be true at the same time. I'm consistent. I'm nuanced. I believe that there's a strong chance that Candace Owens has controlled opposition. However, the words that come out of her mouth, I agree with them. Her politics, for the most part, I agree with them. Her theories about a lot of different things in this world and in politics and in the music industry in Hollywood, I agree with. She talks about a lot of the same things. But I have to be skeptical, not only from the ties that her husband has, which, by the way, they met like after 2 weeks and got married, which is very strange to me in 2025, well, in the 21st century, but it's just weird. You just never hear about stuff like that. But even if you wanted to give that a pass, her husband's family history that I covered in the video, could somebody explain to me the support of the algorithm that she gets? Because she talks about a lot of things that are considered cliche, considered off limits, but the algorithm supports her like none other. It's the same thing with Nick Fuentes. It doesn't matter how popular you are. It's similar to like Charleston White. Nick Fuentes is like the new Charleston White, because it was like a 3 or 4, maybe even 5-year gap where you couldn't go anywhere without seeing Charleston White. His name was everywhere. His thumbnail was everywhere. He was featured on some podcast that you would least expect him to be on. He said the most controversial, the most polarizing things, but he was everywhere. He had channels deleted. A lot of people don't know that about Charleston White. He had like maybe 5 or 6, 7, 8 YouTube channels deleted. He had his Instagram, I think, taken from him like 2 or 3 different times. Well, it's the same thing with Nick Fuentes. It's like, why does the algorithm support you? It doesn't matter how popular you are, how much people want to see you. If they control the media, if they control the narrative, they can prevent you from trending. But you trend. That's the part that confuses me. He's everywhere, bro. Twitter, all across YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. The guy's everywhere. Why would they be allowing him to get this message out that are considered off limits, considered anti-Semitic, considered wrong, unless he's supposed to be trending, unless he's supposed to be pushing these narratives? Look, when you're having dinners with people like Kanye West and Donald Trump, he had a dinner with Donald Trump and I understand a lot of people who follow him think that, well, if I was as articulate and as adamant and unafraid and bold as he is, that could have been me. No, it couldn't have. That's what I'm telling you. It's the same thing when people see all these celebrities and stuff on Hollywood. You think if you did what they did, you would make it to where they are. No, that's not how it works. You're not a part of the club. The fact that Kanye West reached out to this guy and was a part of a whole little movement for a short period of time where they were seen on camera and drawing up all this media attention, who's using Kanye West to shine a light on this person unless he's supposed to have this light shined on him? More people are supposed to know about him. And you can make the argument this is when Kanye West was off the rails, but I still find it strange. Because again, there's a way that they can prevent this from happening, but they didn't. Because make no mistake, despite the fact that Kanye West has went off the rails many times, Kanye West, I believe, has been under MK Ultra. I believe he's admitted that himself. And Kanye West has a handler. And I believe it to be the guy who claims to be his gymnast or something, his gym trainer. He has a handler. So why is Nick Fuentes still trending in the algorithm? And before I end this video, I'm going to give you all an answer of why I think, so that there's nothing left to the imagination. I believe that he's in the algorithm. I believe that he's trending because his role, and this is all speculation, if he sees this video, I have no problem. I'm actually very open to having a conversation with him. I believe that he is being used, knowingly or unknowingly, to push the country in a particular direction. Because remember what I talked about in the Albert Pike, the Freemason video, where I covered him and Donald Trump, the 3 World War letter that he wrote? He said the last World War, the 3rd World War, is supposed to happen between the Zionists and the Palestinian people. What's going to help us get there? If you have a part of America turning against Israel, because that was also in the letter. It says that it's going to get to a point where America is going to turn against Israel. What is Nick Fuentes doing? He's rallying up a large amount of Americans. Y'all do not need to underestimate this guy. And he's exposing a lot of truth, that a lot of things that are just undeniable, to the point where many Americans are just no longer going to be for the Israel thing. And then that's going to take us further into the New World Order. That's my opinion. That's what I think is going on here. So again, I agree with Nick Fuentes on a plethora of different topics. I think he's incredibly talented. But I also believe that he loves attention just like the other average human. I think he doesn't want allies, even those that are supposed to be a part of the movement. I think he finds ways to fall out with people. I think there's a strong chance he's controlled opposition based on the simple fact that the algorithm is still supporting him. Because it reminds me of Trump. Remember, Trump was so non-traditional and he said a lot of things you're not supposed to say and he was off script. He got elected. Here's Nick Fuentes. He's banned off all these things. He says all these things he's not supposed to say. Now look at him. He's trending. Loved by so many different people. Keep your eyes on him. Hop in the comment section. Give me your thoughts, man. My name's Demetrius. I go by Didi. That's all for this one. Until next time. Peace.
Oh yeah, Didi got a podcast.